undercover police officers worked to entrap as many homosexual men as possible. Entrapment usually consisted of an undercover officer finding a man in a bar or a park and engaging him in conversation. If the conversation headed toward the possibility that they might leave together, he was arrested for solicitation. By the mid-60s, over 100 men were being arrested per week. The Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village did not look like a place that could start a revolution. In 1966, 3 members of the mafia had invested to turn the Stonewall Inn into a gay bar. Once a week, a police officer would collect envelopes of cash as payoff as the bars didn't have liquor licenses. It had no running water behind the bar. Used glasses were run through tubs of water and immediately reused. There were no fire exits and the toilets overran consistently. The Stonewall Inn was a dive, but it was the only bar for gay men in New York City where dancing was allowed. Visitors to the Stonewall Inn were greeted by a bouncer who inspected them through a peephole in the door. To avoid unwittingly letting in undercover police, visitors would have to be known by the doorman or look gay. Patrons were required to sign their names in a book to prove that the bar was a private, so-called bottle club. Back then, I went to New York City once a year on business, and my name appears in the book. The whole place was made for hiding, one way or another. For example, the interior was painted black, making it very dark inside, with pulsing gel lights or black lights. If vice were spotted, regular white lights were turned on, signaling that everyone should stop dancing or touching. And just so you know, Stonewall wasn't the only place that did this. For example, this harassment happened in gay bars all around the country, including here in LA and Orange County. Police raids on gay bars were frequent, occurring an average of once a month for each bar. Bar management usually knew about raids beforehand due to police tip-offs. During a typical raid, the lights were turned on, customers were lined up, and their identification cards checked. Those without identification or dressed in full drag were arrested. Others were allowed to leave. Employees and management of the bars were typically arrested. Then at 1:20 a.m. on Saturday, June 28, 1969, 4 plainclothes policemen in dark suits, 2 patrol officers in uniform, a detective and deputy inspector arrived at the Stonewall Inn's door and announced, "Police, we're taking the place." There had been no tip-off. There was no time to hide the liquor and no chance to warn patrons. It was the club's worst nightmare. The patrons were told to line up against the wall and be ready to produce their identification. Those whose gender didn't appear to match their driver's license would be arrested, and those without identification would be taken into another room to have their sex verified. The Stonewall Inn was a sanctuary for drag queens and a favorite haunt for underage and homeless members of the LGBTQ community. In short, on the morning of June 28th, the Stonewall was full of people who had every reason not to want to show their IDs. The rumbling started with the drag queens unwilling to accompany officers into the back room to have their sex checked. Then other patrons refused to show their identification cards. Annoyed, the police decided that everyone would be taken to the station. Angry and frustrated, Marcia Johnson, a black trans woman, proclaimed her rights by throwing a shot glass into a mirror. By this time, outside the Stonewall Inn, a crowd was gathering. Anger, humiliation, and frustration at being treated so inhumanely was simmering. Stormé de la Varie's anger finally boiled over. She fought with police officers, resisting arrest, escaping from the wagon multiple times, and she was clubbed for it. Bleeding, and battered, she turned to the crowd and shouted, "Why don't you do something?" After an officer picked her up and heaved her roughly into the back of the wagon, the crowd exploded. New York City's gay community could indeed do something. After all, the crowd vastly outnumbered the police. The crowd threw objects and yelled for justice, forcing the police to retreat into the bar. The patrons then set the Stonewall Inn on fire. At 4 a.m., the Stonewall was in ruins and the streets were quiet, but police and rioters had been hospitalized and luckily no one died. But things were only just beginning. Emboldened and demanding their rights, the gay community turned out again the following night and the night after that, taking to the streets, demanding justice and a voice. What had once been secret was now out, and there was no shoving it back in the closet.
After Stonewall. The Stonewall riots were a pivotal point in the fight for equality for LGBTQ people. The rainbow-colored dragon was awakened. Within months of the riots, multiple gay rights organizations and gay newspapers were created. In 1970, on the one-year anniversary of Stonewall, thousands of supportive New Yorkers and members of various LGBT groups marched from Greenwich Village to Central Park in commemoration of the riots. They called it the Christopher Street Liberation Day, since that is where Stonewall Inn was located. That march is now considered the country's first gay pride parade. The energy that the riots generated sparked a flurry of advancements for LGBTQ rights. The Rainbow Dragon now knew the power of a community for effective change, and they sought that change in the political and cultural arena. In 1974, Kathy Kazachenko was the first LGBT person to be elected to any U.S. political office, Ann Arbor, Michigan's City Council. In 1978, Harvey Milk was the first openly gay man to be elected to a California post as San Francisco's city supervisor, and then he was tragically assassinated only 11 months in office. In 1979, 10 years after Stonewall, 100,000 people participated in the first national march on Washington for lesbian and gay rights. By the 1980s, it appeared that we were starting to win our fight for equality. Then came the devastating setback, AIDS. With HIV/AIDS came discrimination and hate instead of compassion and support. President Reagan swept AIDS under the rug, while his administration treated it as a joke. An unfathomable number of deaths of our gay friends resulted in this ignorance and discrimination. In 1992, President Clinton had promised to lift the ban on gays in the military. The gay witch hunts on military personnel had been going on since the 1950s. I was a victim of the witch hunt after 3 honorable years of service in the Air Force. That's a story for another day. Clinton lacked the support he needed for an all-out ban, so instead he created the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. It allowed gays and lesbians to serve but forced them into hiding. They faced a prompt dismissal if anyone found out about their sexual orientation. The military continued to dismiss thousands of gays and lesbian service members through the 1990s. Also, under Clinton's watch, marriage equality took a blow. In 1996, President Clinton signed the Defense of Marriage Act, or DOMA, a federal law that defined marriage for federal purposes as the union of one man and one woman. Individual states could vote to allow gays and lesbians to marry, but other states could refuse to recognize those marriages. Though Clinton thought DOMA was too far-reaching, Congress had passed the bill with enough votes to override a presidential veto, so he signed it anyway. In February 2004, President George W. Bush called for a constitutional amendment to ban same-sex marriage nationwide, but it failed in Congress. On June 26, 2013, the Supreme Court overturned the ban on same-sex marriage in California. On that same day, at a rally celebrating the decision. We weren't sure how the Supreme Court was going to decide, so we had to plan for a wedding that may or may not happen, with the date being sometime in the last 2 weeks of June. An unconventional wedding for sure. Though we were thrilled to be the beneficiaries of California's equal marriage law, we vowed on our wedding day to continue fighting for the other states to do the same. Exactly 2 years later, the Supreme Court established same-sex marriage as a federal right by a landmark decision in a 5-4 ruling. Though marriage equality in the U.S. was a huge triumph, it's not the end of our equality fight. Now, with more conservative-leaning Supreme Court justices, thanks to our president, who shall not be named, many gays and lesbians are afraid that the court might try to overturn our right to marriage. And besides marriage, there are other legal issues that are far from solved. In 28 states, there are no explicit statewide laws at all protecting people from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity in employment, housing, and public accommodations. In those states, you can get married on Saturday and then go to work on Monday to get fired for being gay. It's legal in 28 states to refuse to serve someone in a restaurant or wedding cake bakery because you're gay or trans. And in those states, a landlord can reject your apartment application if they have religious beliefs that believe LGBTQ people are immoral. Our church has been instrumental in helping promote LGBTQ rights. For many years, our church's AIDS team ministry volunteers helped people living with AIDS by preparing and delivering nutritious meals, plus hugs and comfort. In 2008, we hosted phone banks against Prop 8, and many of our members spent hours and hours on the phone, encouraging people to vote against the California ballot proposition that banned gay marriage in California. We put a huge banner on the outside of our church that read, "Civil marriage is a civil right." In 2015, Beth and I started the LGBTQ Action Group here. We bring in a different LGBTQ speaker each month, and we produce events throughout the year to help educate and support our community. Everyone is invited to attend our meetings on the second Sunday of the month. We have several wonderful straight allies that are our loyal attendees. Last year, our church helped turn Orange County blue, which helped flip the House to the Democrats. Many of our members pounded the pavement and helped Democrat Harley Rue to get elected to the House, replacing longtime incumbent and no friend of the gays, Dana Rohrabacher. In April, half of our church's offering money was sent to the Center, OC, the primary LGBTQ support resource in the county. Our funds help support their youth leadership training through the program, Creating Change. And we have a fun way for all of you to show your support of LGBTQ rights. This coming Saturday, OC Pride, the annual celebration of all things LGBTQ, our church will be marching in the Pride Parade again this year. Everyone's invited to join us. Wear rainbow colors and check the blast for details about where and when to meet that morning. Just know that there may be some things you won't be able to unsee. At the Pride Festival, we will be celebrating the rights we have gained so far as a community, but we need to remember that the first Pride was in response to a riot, the Stonewall riot. Though we've come a long way since Stonewall, there's still much work to be done. Our fight will not end until all LGBT